Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
We're here today at the University at Albany Art Museum in our current exhibition, which is called Uncharted. This exhibition is on view through December 13th, and we're going to talk about some of the artworks that are included, as well as the general ideas behind the exhibition itself. I'm here with Corinna Ripps Schaming, who is Associate Director and Curator of the museum, and who co-curated this exhibition with me. So welcome, Corinna. The exhibition is actually part of the Hudson Fulton Champlain Quadricentennial celebration, which is going on right now. And when Corinna and I first spoke about the idea of organizing an exhibition in conjunction with the anniversary, we decided to think kind of broadly about the theme. We started, you could say, with what every school child knows about Henry Hudson, that he started his journeys looking for a shortcut, if you will, to the Far East, and he ended up discovering a continent that contained riches in the natural resources far beyond anything he expected to find. And so the more we thought about it, we thought that we'd like to really work with this theme of exploration and discovery. And so we brought together the work of 10 artists and who explore this theme in many different ways. So I think that you'll find that each of them in their own way really presents a complete universe and a world that's of their own imaginings, and I hope that you will come to see the exhibition and share with us this voyage of discovery. Herbert's work, and it's called Holiday, and it's a work that we commissioned for this exhibition. And in talking to David about his work and following it for many years, we decided that he would be a great artist to bring to the exhibition to interpret our theme. I think one of the fun things that Uncharted does is that it goes beyond maybe the myth-making that sometimes accompanies our historical perspective, and also the kind of way that we tend to romanticize notions of history. And so what we have here is David's vessel. It is peopled, as you'll see, by a whole little squadron of Scrooge McDucks. And the entire thing is made out of sort of very cheap, inexpensive wood and laminated wood. And then the McDucks are all made out of paper. They're constructed out of paper. And in fact, David did that work here in the museum, working with our work study students and our student interns at the University of Albany. So why would David have his vessel manned by Scrooge McDucks? Well, I think in a way that what David wants us to be reminded of is that while we think about heroic voyages of discovery and exploration, that much of the impetus for those journeys was economic. And so we have the McDucks who were there searching for their fortune and their fame through their exploration. And I think if you remember Scrooge McDuck in those many cartoons down in his basement fortress, like with coins and jewels and sitting in piles of money, it kind of gives us that backstory to history that I think is easily forgotten and easily put aside as we sort of celebrate notions of heroicism and glory and the greater good. In front of the work by
Matt Linus, a young, very prolific artist. I think that it's very interesting in thinking about the theme of this exhibition, Uncharted, and thinking that there are all different types of journeys that one can undertake. And one of the journeys that Janet and I discussed in thinking about the exhibition is the idea of the artist's journey or the artist's process in arriving at their work. I was fortunate enough to be able to have seen Matt's paintings in a very early stage. And I can tell you that what you see now is nothing like what he started out creating. So that idea of the artistic process also mirrors some of the other thoughts that Janet had alluded to earlier. Matt has an incredibly fertile imagination. He works across cultural references, historical sources, everything from hockey games to He-Man wrestlers, and taking more of an art historical background. He's also channeling medieval manuscripts, Celtic monks. All of these sources come up and kind of bubble forth in his imagination, in his creation of these hybrid heroic beings. They're peopled by, these canvases are peopled by creations that don't exist anywhere else other than in Matt's imagination. I liked it because we had one student who was commenting on the exhibition, and she said that she felt that these portraits were like alien generals, sort of overseeing the proceedings of everything else in the exhibition. And I like to think of these works in those terms. What's really, really significant is, if you have the opportunity to see Matt's work, is to really be able to look very closely at the level of intricate detail that he brings to each one of his paintings, because it really, truly is incredible.
We're here in front of Anna Conway's work. And Anna is an artist who lives and works in Brooklyn, and she conjures up worlds that are intensely imaginative, a little scary, narratives that take us places that we've never been and really are unlikely to go, as a matter of fact. And what I particularly like about Anna's work, and this, we're standing in front of a painting called Alejandro, is that Anna takes the notion of exploration and discovery into like everyday life, because the painting that we're looking at now has a young man who's really just sort of sweeping up a kind of picnic area, and over to the right is a large sort of unidentified massive kind of balloon form that's looming in over this poor young man Alejandro. And so I think that it in a way, Anna's work, it's meticulously rendered, it's beautifully painted, and it also serves to remind us that these kind of the sort of the unknown and the unexpected are present in the most commonplace tasks of our everyday life. I think that each of her paintings, and there are several of them in the show, is kind of a world unto its own. They are richly imagined, and they provide a window into territory that we really have never visited before. Enfield, Massachusetts is a painting by Anna Conway that presents a sort of two gentlemen and an SUV that's parked in this sort of, it looks a little bit like a quarry. It has a sort of non-reflecting pool of water at the bottom of the canvas down here. Enfield, Massachusetts was one of the wealthiest towns in Massachusetts before the Civil War. But by the 1930s, the decline of the Enfield rifle meant that the economy of Enfield had really hit bottom. And it seemed a likely place to construct a new reservoir for that area of Massachusetts. And so residents were relocated, and the town of Enfield was actually flooded and disappeared from the map by 1939. I think what's wonderful about Anna's painting is that she's created this sort of mysterious narrative that we're drawn into. We don't know exactly what these figures are doing or why they're here, or whether this is part of the flooding in the reservoir or some, adjunct place nearby. But she's created this world that sort of draws us in and fills us with questions and wondering. And I think it's a beautiful painting that really sort of conjures up the unknown and our sort of inability to really find answers all the time when we confront things we don't know about.
We're happy to have one of the artists in the exhibition with us, Adam Frelin. Adam is on the faculty at the University at Albany in the Fine Arts Department. And in his project, Diviner, Adam has combined sculptural props, video, found objects, and photographs to tell an unfolding narrative about the impact of tumultuous weather on a Midwestern community. At the core of the narrative is a somewhat unlikely protagonist named Joe York, a disabled young man who has a special interest in forecasting the weather. One of the definitions of a diviner is someone who claims that they can predict events, often through supernatural means. So I was wondering, Adam, what you were thinking about when you titled the piece, Diviner.
Well, ironically, the title of the piece up until a month before the first iteration of this exhibition was Let's Pretend Weatherman, because throughout the film, Joe, who has an interest in meteorology, this film was a platform for him to be able to enact that interest of his. But the more I worked on the film, and the more I worked with Joe, he dropped lots of religious references to why the weather happened and when it would happen. And I started to realize that there was something maybe a little bit undermining about my original title, and that his role in this film became more and more sort of predominant and important. And therefore, I wanted his stance, in spite of the fact that he happens to be mentally disabled, to be integral enough to the fact that it almost seems like he controls what has happened throughout the course of the film.
I think it's very interesting in all of your work how you merge fact and fiction. And as you begin a project and go through the process of the project, could you talk a little bit about how you determine what you're going to stage and what you're going to leave alone?
Yeah, I think in this case I actually ended up, it is something that I often seem to do in my work. I like the conflation of these worlds. I think it comes from my interest in even magical realist fiction. But in this case it actually was sort of less of something that I arbitrarily included into the project and something that was pretty inherent to it. That being Joe, who doesn't happen to be a weatherman, but actually pretends to be a weatherman throughout the film. So he's ostensibly acting. And then all these unpredictable weather-related events took place last summer in the Midwest while we were filming that worked their way into the film. And often I would come across something like a banner similar to this one that was outside of a town in which a Boy Scout lodge was hit by a tornado and killed several Boy Scouts. Or there's a piece of foam that ripped off of a building during a windstorm in Omaha, or a model of the Ark of the Covenant that was found outside of a flooded church in Iowa City. I felt like the story wasn't finished with the sort of documentary footage that I found of each of these things. So what I decided to do is recreate them and use them as props, where I pulled them into sort of a fictional world to sort of combine and conflate these different stories. Sort of similar to what a diviner would do in the first place, which is sort of make something up or glean information that might not be wholly evident.
Last question that I have is really kind of in context to this exhibition, the actions of travel and discovery. are central, they seem to me, to your practice, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how they inform your overall practice.
I often use art as an excuse to travel and go places that I wouldn't go otherwise. It's a great sort of way to fool oneself into doing something they might not otherwise. So in this case, it just so happened that I was invited to work on a project out in the Midwest. I didn't want to predetermine what the end result would be, so I contacted an agency where I found Joe, and he brought the content to the story. So from there, you just sort of grab on the end of something and let it pull you. I just finished a project in India as well, working with a group of blind people. And as much as you can sort of predetermine the situation, there's always a lot left to be determined. And I think within what's left to be determined is where you actually find the content of your work, and you have the potential to end up with something that's less predictable and probably more interesting than you would have set out.
Thank you, Adam. And I'm very excited because we're going to be able to show just a short clip from the video component of the project. And the video is also titled Diviner.
This is Chief Meteorologist Joe York, live from Channel 6. The winds are about blowing out like crazy. There's some glass windows right in front of your wind side. If you see the rain falling right there, the winds are blowing about 70 or 80 mile an hour winds.
This is from the National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for Douglas County effective until 2:30 in the morning. I repeat, the National Weather Service in Omaha has a tornado which have a big lightning those winds are possible in these tornadoes. If you're in a warm area, please take shelter immediately. If you're in a mobile home, evacuate the mobile home right now. Seek shelter right now.
Now it's raining right now. What the hell is falling right now, right there? Wow, look at that! That's a good storm! Woo! Look at that! Hail started falling right now. If you look, whoa!
These darkly luminous landscape paintings are by Brooklyn-based painter Cameron Martin. They're paintings that start with the notion of landscape painting with a lineage that goes all the way back to German Romantic painting, through the Hudson River School, all the way through really to pop art. Although they feel and look like perhaps a conventional landscape, they're far from it. The paintings themselves are made through a very complex process of layering and masking paint. To create just these monochromatic paintings, Cameron often will do up to 17 layers of different shades of a particular paint color. I'm standing in front of a painting titled Double Salray. And the painting itself depicts from one side to the next the exact same rock formation. But Cameron sets up a bit of a trope, if you will, by, first of all, calling it double salary. I asked Cameron, what does salary mean? It's spelled S-A-L-R-Y. And he himself said, well, it could be a nonsense word, it could be a word that's misspelled, or it could be a name. But the idea that that word is graffitied onto the first painted canvas, and then when you look at the second canvas, it's completely gone. Cameron is setting up this expectation that puts a little bit of a twist, I think, of what our expectations would be in reading the painting. The sign of salary, a graffitied presence on the rock, would suggest a human presence, and that human presence in the end is erased by geological time. When you think about exploration, our usual assumptions are that something exists, if you will, for man to conquer it. And in the end, I think that Cameron Martin's idea is that we've taken this notion of geological time, and really geological time is what has gained over human mortality, if you will.
We're here in front of Valerie Hegarty's installation. It's called Overseas. And in a way, we've kind of come full circle from talking about David Herbert's ship Holiday and the Scrooge McDucks. Valerie's work is also constructed out of very cheap and materials. While it looks very solid and very substantial, it's actually created from foam core, paint, glue, and the only thing that's really is not constructed of those materials are these ropes that are hanging from the harpoons, but everything else, including the harpoons, is actually made from paper. So what Valerie has given us is a wonderful Federal period mantelpiece and overmantel, very much of the time, beginning of the 1800s. And she's also given us a replica of a Frederick Church painting of icebergs. Church did a very famous series of iceberg paintings, and they really sort of exemplify sort of what at that time was little explored and even less known by the general population. And it was a world that was sort of magical, that contained these majestic, untainted landscapes and these monumental icebergs in blue seas. And what Valerie's done is sort of given us a little bit of the underside or the backstory of those by presenting the works and the mantelpiece like with these giant harpoons and a seagull and seagull droppings, which usually come along with seagulls as well. And you know, I think that part of what Valerie is doing is she's sort of she's talking about the art historical canon and the reverence in which these masterpieces are held. But she's also talking about this particular era and that, while there was a sense of civilized life sitting in front of Federal period mantelpieces sipping tea, much of that the economic base of the culture was created through industries such as whaling, and I think that the harpoons take us back to that in a very graphic way. So I thought that this would be a good place to close our exploration of Uncharted. Corinna and I haven't had time to talk about all the artists in the show, but I did want to mention them all, and I hope that you'll come back to explore these works and other works more closely. And the other artists in the show are Radcliffe Bailey, Olaf Bruning, Anna Conway, Mark Essen, Adam Frelin, Valerie Hegarty, David Herbert, Emre Hunner, Matt Linus, and Cameron Martin. And so these works are here at the University at Albany Art Museum. I hope you'll come by to see the exhibition, and it's on view till December 13th. Thanks very much.